Okay, we'll see how this goes, everybody. I see that we got 11 people in the room. If you can find your chat on the right side of your screen, at least it's on the right side of mine, and try to give me a, yes, I'm here, this is working, so I don't start talking to myself, that would be great, and we will get started here in about, 3 minutes or so. Okay, looks like we're up to 17 people. Very exciting. Again, we'll start about 7:05. See if you can find the chat screen on the right side if you are interested in asking any questions. And also to let me know that you made it into the session and will get credit for this evening. All right, it looks like we have 18 people now. If someone could give me a, yes, it's working, you can hear me in the chat, that would be great. Otherwise, I'm just talking to myself. All right, how are we doing? Is everybody in that's going to be in? It is 7:05. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. and we'll go ahead and get started. If you have questions as we go ahead and write them in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. I have a chat box. Hopefully you do too. If you can't hear me, then I'm really sorry. All right, tonight's session, we are going to be talking about 1945 to the present. That includes these presidents: Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, and then the second Bush. As far as I know, Obama is not on the AP test yet, and all of your essays will end, well, they should go up to Reagan. So after Reagan, you won't have any essays as far as I am aware. So that's where we will get started for the day. We're going to talk about Eisenhower here. But before we do that, if you guys would all write like hello or something in the group chat so I'll know who's here. We've got 20 people it looks like so far. And you might be with a friend, so type a little hello in your name so I know that you have made it to the Hangout. And then we'll talk Eisenhower. Okay, well, I don't see anybody typing anything. I hope you were able to hear, but we'll just move on, and I'll assume everybody can hear me just fine. Okay, so Eisenhower. Let's start talking about Eisenhower. The Korean War is during Eisenhower's tenure as president. This is the first time the United States uses war and military to enact containment. So this was a test of the containment policy, and the United States, of course, defends Korea, starting with Truman. And Truman fires MacArthur, of course, because MacArthur wants to take on China, but Truman doesn't want to take on China. Anyway, the Korean War ends just as it began, with a division at the center of Korea. So that's the significance of the Korean War as the first military use to defend containment. The next thing that occurs during Eisenhower is a lot of civil rights issues. The first being Brown versus Board of Education, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Thurgood and Marshall argues for Brown against the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, and that will be the beginning of integration for public schools. However, the big issue here, of course, is that the laws, or the court case is passed, and immediately you don't see integration. So there's a conflict between the policy change, the law that's passed, and the implementation. So obviously we've looked, and integration did not happen in 1954 immediately after Brown versus Board. So that's kind of something they may talk about, and that goes back to 13, 14, and 15 Amendment, when those were passed, and then you look at the South, how fast were those implemented in the South. So if you have an essay question kind of about that, you know, when laws are passed versus when things actually change, that might be some interesting things to bring up. Along with civil rights, I guess I should have grouped these differently. We have the Civil Rights Act of 1957. That was a lesser-known civil rights act, I suppose, in the scheme of civil rights acts when we look at the 60s. But this one began a division for civil rights in the Justice Department. So taking more legal action to protect civil rights, especially with integration. And shortly after that, Little Rock Central High School, which you're aware the governor decided he was going to stop those students from entering the school, and President Eisenhower uses the National Guard to come in and defend their right to go to school. So that was the use of a federal power, the military, to help the students at Little Rock Central High School. So finally, on a big scale, the national government is stepping in as opposed to letting just the local governments handle integration. Montgomery bus boycott, Rosa Parks, familiar with that. I think that's all I have with civil rights under Eisenhower. So those are all things that you may want to remember. McCarthyism happens during this time, the 1950s, Red Scare, HUAC, the House Un-American House Un-American Activities Committee, and of course Richard Nixon is the chair of that, and he helps, sift out all the communists. And Senator McCarthy, of course, continues to attack senators, attacks other people in the government, attacks Hollywood actors, and then he decides to call Eisenhower a communist, which resulted in the end of McCarthyism. So Eisenhower put an end to McCarthy, just like back during the early time when we talked about the Salem witch trials, that the Salem, the girls all accuse that lady, and eventually goes up to the governor, they accuse the governor, and he puts an end to it. So once it reaches kind of a critical point, that's all been shut down. Also during Eisenhower, we have the Federal Highway Act. This leads to increased movement to the suburbs. Oh, and I'm getting a note that you did this with Coach Vaughn. So this is a redo. Okay, give me just a second. Well, at least you can hear me, I guess, as I'm getting this text in that you guys did this with Coach Vaughn. There's no reason to go through it again. But hang on just a second, we'll kind of see. And I'm guessing the chat feature is not working. Can someone try the chat feature? Alright, let's see. Oh, okay. Well, I can see someone just sent me a text of all of you guys. You did get through Bush. Okay, so you've already done this PowerPoint as I'm texting away here. And I'm surprised that I can't see your comments. Let me see. Discussion. No. Let's see. Well, I do like to see that everybody's here. I'm sorry that this doesn't seem to be working on my end and that you've already done this. So, let me see. Okay, so I tell you what. We can talk about a few kind of test-related issues, but are there things, and if you want to, I guess for filtering through our texter, if there are things you want me to cover that you are not sure of, or hey, I want to go back and review such and such time period, we can do that. I'm so sorry that you've already covered it on his review. It said that you hadn't done this yet, so awesome. But if there are things, one thing I will cover while you text away and type away in the comments about things that you want to review, I did write down a few notes myself that was not on the original PowerPoint that we can kind of talk about. That's just kind of food for thought. It doesn't necessarily have any conclusive thought, but when you are thinking about your essays, a lot of them are going to be essays that cover bigger picture. So you know a lot of the nuts and bolts. You know the IDs, you know the people, you know the wars, you know the legislation amendments, you know all of those things, and it's going to be putting into a broader context. Colonial era. Okay, cool. Let me finish this one thought, and then I will pull up the colonial era, and we'll talk about that. We'll review, I guess the PowerPoint is a good way to start, and then we can take questions, I suppose, at that point. I'm so sorry I can't see the text or the chats because you guys are chatting a bunch, and I just see myself. Okay, so anyway, things to think about are cycles. How has the United States kind of gone in one direction and another direction? And there's kind of a pendulum swing, and that's kind of interesting to note. There's a lot of conflicts between modern and traditional values that will occur pretty much, I would say, throughout the entire course of history, but especially in the 20th century. Starting in the 1920s, you have the obvious, the cultural clash between the people who want a little more freedom, especially women, so modern versus traditional values, getting away from religion. Then you have the 50s where it goes back to more of a traditional view. You have conformity, with, of course, the exception, you could say the beat movement is kind of going against the conformity of the time. But then once you have conformity in the 50s, it swings back to the 60s and counterculture and people protesting and kind of not giving any care to what standard rules are in the United States. And then, as you talked about last week, the return in the 80s of the moral majority, and how dare we ever think those things, and kind of the religious movement back into kind of social ideas that are very conservative. So as you start thinking about prepping for essays, think of the broader ideas, like we talked about with Brown versus Board and the Civil Rights Amendments, and even the Civil Rights Acts for that matter. How soon after those things are passed do we see the change? So those are some things to talk about. But since we are kind of out on that one, let's go. Let me see if I can find, I don't have all of my files. Let's see if I can find them somewhere, and we can talk colonial. Just hold on a second. Okay, hey everybody, welcome to my house. I'm going to try to figure out how to pull up my old files, which I think are on the Moodle, so yay for the Moodle. Okay, let's see. I feel like I'm telling a ghost story here. Okay, no more ghost stories for you. We will go back to the Moodle. Let's see. Hopefully no one has any issues or motion sickness. Okay. We'll go back to this one, and this will kind of help me refresh my memory of what things especially we need to cover. Assuming it will load. And maybe it won't. Okay, so then in that case, sorry, this is kind of a goofy thing here. Let's go down to the handouts you got, and I'll try to give you what's not here, because I know you're more than capable of reading this page. Renaissance. Okay. Colonial. All right, so let me go back to my screen share. Get on the colonial page. Hello, everyone again. Colonial. Okay, so this was the handout of the first review. Okay, went over with colonial with the Frisco lady. Okay, I'm getting lots of conflicting accounts. Okay, so I will briefly do a quick colonial thing. I know it sounds like you went over it, like I said, with the Frisco lady. But if there's something else you'd like to cover too, someone type it and then text it to me somehow. Essentially, we have the South. South's aristocratic. They're going to be more cash crop, indentured servants. And because of indentured servants, we see large plantations because the rich people could pay for people to come over, and that meant that they could expand their property. That led to a lot of conflict between rich and poor, and Bacon's Rebellion. Let me get over to the page here. What else do they want you to know? Important things to note, along with all of these, nice facts about them. Remember when you have essays that if it's talking about the southern colonies, it's Virginia South, right? Virginia, Maryland, Maryland South would probably be more accurate. Maryland, Virginia, North and South Carolina, and Georgia. And then when you talk about the middle colonies, I have New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. What am I missing one? New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware. There we go, Delaware. And then, of course, the New England colonies are the remainder of the colonies. So remember when the essays are talking about a specific group of colonies, because you probably will have one like that, that you talk about the colonies that apply. Okay, and then requests for the Gilded Age. Okay, so we'll do a quick colonies and then we'll do a quick Gilded Age. In the South, primarily Church of England, Anglican. Those people are coming over. Jamestown, of course, the first people, gentlemen just wanting gold, wasted their time. It was a disaster. And later on, of course, they discovered the cash crop of tobacco, which the King of England didn't really like because it was so addictive. But that was good for those people who were trying to sell it and survive. So that was nice. Let's see what else you need to know. Obviously, the buffer colony with Spanish Florida was Georgia. And that's where all the criminals went, and they also saw it as an opportunity for mission. Act of Toleration, remember, isn't really that tolerant. So Maryland was for Catholics, originally settled by Lord Baltimore as a haven for Catholics moving over. It was the only Catholic colony for England. And eventually, so many Protestants move in, and they didn't like the Catholics. And so many Protestants move in that they say, fine, we'll have this Act of Toleration. If you're Christian, great. If you're not, you should be killed. So that was the Act of Toleration, kind of in rough terms. New England, Puritan, strict rules, hard-working, frugal, bad land, so a lot more towns, small-knit communities, beginnings of cities. Education was more prominent there than it was in the South. The South, your neighbors were so far away, it didn't make sense to have schools. Whereas in New England, it was easy, because you're in a small town based around a church, to have a whole bunch of people attend school. And originally, the universities built in New England were the first, and of course, for training new priests or pastors of the Puritans. Let's see what else you need to know. Another thing that may be an essay topic, I'm not sure, is the development of democracy in America and local control. You can talk about House of Burgesses, of course, in Virginia. Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, Mayflower Compact, all those good things. Halfway Covenant, here we talked about a long, long time ago, which is about the church, but bringing more people into the church. So you don't necessarily think of it as a government idea, because it was really to get more people welcome into the church that were not necessarily elect people, because But because back in the day the church was the site of government and those who were elect members in government were the only ones who could vote in New England, the halfway covenant can be seen as a domestic institution, which is kind of an interesting way to think about it. And oh, and of course Rhode Island. Rhode Island was where all the misfits went. Anne Hutchison, right, she said, well, fine, if you say predestination and I'm already either going to heaven or hell, then I'm just going to live how I want to live. And so that was her big, sacrilegious statement. Middle colonies, breadbasket, most diverse as far as people from different places. Remember, New York originally was established by the Netherlands, the Dutch. It was a business opportunity for them. Remember, Wall Street is about business, and that's what the Dutch created to protect themselves from the Native Americans. And then eventually they will lose it to England because England just says, oh yeah, it's ours. Pennsylvania. Quakers were most tolerant, most liberal, very friendly with Native Americans. If you remember, they wanted to pay the Native Americans just like Roger Williams did for their land and had a little treaty of sorts, even though the Native Americans didn't really appreciate the idea of ownership of land. The Quakers were very tolerant, and because they were so tolerant, as you might imagine, more and more people lived there, and it kind of manipulated their idea because then they were not the majority anymore, and they lost their ideas to other groups who were coming in. Great Awakening. This is the first time we see the uniting of the colonies as one, sort of. They have one unique movement, so they all experience the same kind of religious fervor that happens. And so remember Jonathan Edwards, I think you read this in English, the sinners in the hands of an angry God, kind of scaring people back into the church. And there was a lot of emotion and the big speeches out in the middle, the people much more evangelical than before, because before, especially with the Puritans, they didn't want the riffraff in their church. And the Great Awakening was opening things up to more and more people. Salutary neglect, remember that was really important because that's what allowed for the growth of democracy. Because the King of England was not paying attention to what was going on in the colonies, it allowed tradition to happen, and that's, your House of Burgesses, your fundamental orders, and people got used to it, and once they finally decided to rein in that neglect and get control back, all things went terribly wrong. So that's a quick review of colonial. Remember, New England, Puritans, hardworking, thrifty, small towns, education, all that good stuff. Middle colonies, business, economic-oriented, breadbasket, most diverse. If you kind of think of the New England and the Southern both as extremes in one way or another, then you can think of the middle as kind of the compromise. It was very diverse, it had a little bit of everything, and the others had much more extreme characterization. Let's see. Obviously, the influence of religion was most prevalent in the development of the New England colonies. Religion was important in the South, but it was much more about economics, and because of the diversity in the middle colonies, it wasn't nearly as important, except for some of the blue laws, if you remember with the Quakers saying they could have no fun. Okay, that is a quick colonial history. So you have Native Americans, then you have explorers, and you have Jamestown, and you have Plymouth, and of course lots of disease, the English take over, establish colonies, and then you have salutary neglect, which leads to whatever the Americans were doing on their own, French and Indian War, taxes, American Revolution. That was way too simplified, but I hope that makes sense. Questions? I guess Cliff has access to my text, and I'm not sure who else is texting. So anything else with colonial, and then I'm going to skip over to Gilded Age and cover that really quickly. Interactions with Native Americans is a good topic for essays, so think about it over time as I'm stalling for any other questions on colonies. Remember, the French were the most friendly with the Native Americans because of the fur trade. They needed each other. So the French were the most, I guess, kind to Native Americans. Spanish, remember, encomienda, the forced conversion of the Native Americans in missions, and then of course then the Native Americans would be slaves for them. So I don't know who got benefit on the Native American side. Okay, colonial era, antebellum society, and progressive era. So lots and lots of things. Okay. So what I will do, if it's okay with everyone, is that was super fast on colonial. So what I will go through now would be the Gilded Age, and then the next time I will do it on Thursday, and then we'll go through antebellum and progressive, because I feel like it wouldn't do any of them justice since I kind of just did a not so great job of colonial. We'll go through the other two next time. Okay, so let me pull up, just so we have a reference page going. Oh, hello again. Let's see, let me pull up the Moodle. Oh goodness, and now I just have to guess which one's the Gilded Age. I really wish these other PowerPoints would work. Let's see if I can make this one work. Glorious day. Okay, let's talk Gilded Age. Let's go back over here to screen share. There we go. Well, hopefully technology is kind of working on this. Okay, so Gilded Age. The big thing you need to know about Gilded Age is I think of Gilded Age as dirty. Remember, gilded means it looks nice on the outside. So for our 1%ers, if you will, using kind of today's terms, for the 1%ers, life was great. Your Rockefellers, your JP Morgans, Vanderbilts, Carnegies, life was great. They had these innovative business models, you know, your horizontal integration and your vertical integration, and those business models made them lots and lots of money. But at the same time, it was at the expense of the workers. So that's where you get the gilded ideas. You know, some things look really nice and shiny, but really a lot of the people in the United States were not doing as well. So the Gilded Age starts, I would argue, with Hayes and the Krupp bargain, which ends Reconstruction, if you remember. They had the committee that allowed Hayes to be president if the soldiers would be removed from the South, because they didn't want military Reconstruction anymore. So we're going to skip over all of these things. And of course, here you can go through them at your leisure, I suppose. Okay, Gilded Age. So yes, laissez-faire government. The government was not doing anything. And when it did do things, like your Sherman Antitrust Act, it had no teeth. So even when the government was trying to do things, sort of, kind of, it still was in the back pocket of big business. So to the common man, oh, the government's passing laws, but secretly everybody else realized that, you know, the big business people realized that, okay, these legislations aren't going to affect my business. So they were taking action on some level, but it wasn't doing anything. Of course, closing of the frontier, expansion of railroads, pushing the Native Americans even farther and farther out west. Populism is also part of the Gilded Age because the railroads were taking advantage of the farmers. They were putting, I don't want to say this, creating the same cost for tickets. They were in cahoots with each other. So they would say, hey, we're going to charge such and such amount, and they would charge that amount for everybody. And so that way they could all make the most profit. And the farmers were sick of it, because if you remember the graphic we looked at where you have the farmer in the center, and he says, I feed them all, and there's like the I physic this, you got the physicist and the business guy, and anyway, that little image, the farmer was saying, hey, we're really important, we should have our own party. The other thing, so I think dirty in the Gilded Age is, I think, dirty politics. But as some of you talked about in class when we read about Plunkett of Tammany Hall, some of the things could be seen as beneficial that the political machines were doing to maintain power. So they might, you know, build a bridge. They might build low-income housing, they might find jobs for immigrants for votes. So there was a, exchange of goods. There was an understanding between those who were voting and those who were receiving the benefits. But as some of you argued, it wasn't all bad. It becomes bad when you start using more violent measures, or when you didn't have secret ballot, which the populace wanted, when you were forced more or less to tell people who you voted for, or people could look, and if you didn't vote for who you were supposed to, then you could get in trouble with the mob bosses and, of course, their lackeys. So Gilded Age, I think, dirty factories, dirty politics, poor working conditions, because we are going to see big business versus labor. This is where all of those labor strikes, the Haymarket Square riot, Pullman strike. The important thing with all of these, if you see a strike, the strikes more often than not are going to be to end up in the favor of big business. So the government may intervene, but big business is going to win. Labor unions take a while to become effective. So Knights of Labor, of course, start, and then, of course, you have American Federation of Labor later, and the Congress of Industrial Organization, so the CIO. It takes a while for them to actually yield the results they want, because you have, again, the laissez-faire government, sort of, kind of, because when they do take action, it is in the favor of big business. So it's not meddling in the economy, but it is meddling in the economy. This is the big industrial revolution for the United States, lots and lots of factories. If you remember Triangle Shirtwaist Factory and the fire and the PowerPoint that had fire everywhere, because there were no labor laws and there were no business building codes, and workers could be locked in to their factory. And so out of all of these dark, dirty things of the Gilded Age, we'll begin to see progressive change. And that's why people were so motivated for change. Okay, urbanization was another big factor of the Gilded Age, which is, again, why I think dirty. Because if you think of urbanization at the beginning, you drew your little cities a long time ago, if you recall, and there was trash everywhere at the beginning. The infrastructure was not able to keep up with the population growth. So you have an influx of immigrants coming in, and they would live in tenement houses because that's the only place that they could afford, and it was very crowded, and lots of disease and pollution as we start to see lots of factories located in the cities. So Gilded Age, I think dirty. Dirty politics, dirty living, dirty working. I've probably said that word too much. And again, these are all conditions that look progressive. Lots of innovation. We talked about a lot of things being invented during the time period because we had new technology. Immigration. Oh, remember Ellis Island? That's where the people on the East Coast came in. And they would live in ethnic neighborhoods. So your little Italies, Chinatowns. The south side of Boston used to be primarily Irish people. So they would find people that were like them, that spoke their language, because when you first come to a new place, it's really hard, if you don't speak the language, to get around and to adapt. So like when I went to live in Spain, I kind of spoke Spanish, but not really as well as I should. And it was easy for me to kind of find American students if I needed help. So not that that's a great thing, but anyway, people will tend to go where they feel comfortable, and that makes sense. So if you miss your home cooking, then, oh, well, I live in Little Italy, I'm just going to hop around the corner and, Mrs. So-and-so is making her pasta. So that's, the other thing about immigration is it's also going to lead to nativism. So we had nativism in the 1840s with the Irish, nativism again when we see the Western Europeans. Remember, the Western Europeans are the first to come over, your English, French, and then you have the Southern and Eastern Europeans come over turn of the century. So you have 1890s, the old immigrants from Western Europe, which had a lot in common with the people already there, and then the Eastern Europeans didn't have a whole lot in common. So that was a lot of social conflict, especially when they started taking jobs. So nativist big complaint with the immigrants had nothing to do with language, had nothing to do with their food. It had to do with the fact that usually they were willing to take jobs for less money. And that left less opportunity for Americans already there. Social Darwinism begins, survival of the fittest. This will lead to the idea that some people are better off than others just because of science. And that will affect American foreign policy as we start moving into like the Spanish-American War and trying to help others who are less than Americans, according to some people, because Americans have this great moral obligation to help these other people. Okay, there's a map. Industrialization. Again, the North is going to be industrialized pretty much always. So when we talked Civil War, that was their advantage because they had lots of railroads, they had lots of manufacturing. They will also be the first to really industrialize. Even though after the Civil War, people wanted to have the New South, which I think was one of your IDs. And the New South was supposed to be an industrialized South comparable to the North, which, yes, there were factories, but never on the scale of the North. During the Gilded Age, that's what's going on. You have Reconstruction in the South even after, right? Even after the soldiers leave. However, when you have nobody to implement the rules, they're not going to be enforced as well as they would have been with the soldiers there. So if you said, yeah, everybody gets to vote, and then pull the soldiers away, you'll start to see Reconstruction kind of breaking down. And in the West, ranching, mining, farming, your cattle drives, all that stuff is going on at the same time as the Gilded Age. I don't know if I'd call it Gilded Age, but just to get an idea of what's going on in the United States. Sharecropping, Jim Crow, it's kind of Gilded Age. William Jennings Bryan in his Cross of Gold speech, emphasizing bimetallism. We don't want to be nailed to this cross of gold, being a martyr, like, oh, we're going to stick to gold just because I'm dying for this cause, when if we would switch to silver and gold, we would be much better off. So that was kind of his argument there. He ran as a Democratic candidate because the Democrats embraced the populists and the farmers, so they'd have more votes. Native Americans, we talked about that. Railroads, sorry, we're going through this pretty fast. Gilded Age, New York City. Okay, let's talk about acts. Ooh, really important. Although it is during the Gilded Age, remember we have the assassination of Garfield, right? The reason I remember Garfield was assassinated, these are all of your childhood characters. So you have Garfield, Arthur, Grover, right? Remember all these guys? And then Benjamin Harrison's got nothing. But so Garfield is assassinated. He was slow. He ate too much lasagna. And because of that, the I guess almost political machine where you had two factions and like, oh, well, he's not a so-and-so, we're going to kill him. And they decide, well, instead of rewarding people for being part of a political machine, we're going to reward people based on merit. So kind of the early sentiments of reform, which were not full-on into progressives by any stretch of the imagination, but kind of the beginning of reform here, we see the Pendleton Act in 1883, which is where you'd have to take a test for certain government positions. Chinese Exclusion Act, another example of nativism at the time. And we have immigrants coming in through Angel Island on the west coast, and all of a sudden people said, nope, we don't want them in the United States anymore, so they stopped immigration of the Chinese. Navy, of course, that was Alfred Thayer Mahan wanted the modernization of the Navy. That's not really Gilded Age, but it's during that time. Okay. Interstate Commerce Act, remember, deals with commerce in between states. If you forget something, sometimes look at the word. Sometimes it is as obvious as it sounds, especially with like Sherman Antitrust Act, except it didn't really work. Dawes Act was Native Americans. We can talk about that later. Labor conflict, we talked about those. The $1 billion conflict or Congress. All of a sudden, there was all of this money, which goes back to the corrupt politics to some degree, and they had to figure out, well, what do we do with this thing called a surplus? And some of it, yes, was spent on Civil War veteran pensions, and other things were spent on pork barreling, special projects at home that representative senators could say, oh, yeah, look what I did, to get reelected. Antitrust Act, we talked about that. The McKinley Tariff was super high. The McKinley Tariff oh gosh, I want to say it was like 48%, and that was a high protective tariff. Populist Party at the same time, blah, blah, blah. Albert Thermahan's book emphasizing naval power, more strikes. So again, more conflict between big business and labor. Big business still wins. And remember, in every odd decade, essentially, we have some kind of economic crisis. So it's not, I don't know, it's not uncommon, and you think we would learn from it, but remember, a lot of it had to do with speculation. So in the 1920s, it was stock speculation. People thought, okay, well, I can make a lot of money, so I'll take out a loan, I will buy stock with my loan, and I'll make that money back, you know, tenfold really fast. But then all of a sudden the stock market crashes and they owe all the money that they took out to try to buy more and more stock. So that's speculation on the stock market scale. Same type of thing applies with land. A lot of the economic crises were because of land speculation. People were buying things that they couldn't afford based on credit, thinking they could make more money, and the economy tanks. So just remember, we have lots of economic crises, so if you're ever faced with an economic question or an economic component of a essay question, you can always talk about, you know, economic crises based on speculation. I feel like that would be pretty safe. Pullman strike, more strikes, foreign policy stuff, which we can get into, but it's not truly Gilded Age. I would say these things start to get into more imperialism stuff when we just like say, hey, Venezuela, we'll negotiate your disputes for you. We'll just step right in, right? Plessy versus Ferguson is not really Gilded Age, but again, separate but equal. So as long as you have two separate facilities and you're providing, the government said, enough, which we know is not true. Booker T. Washington, that's not really Gilded Age, but again, remember Booker T. Washington advocated, they both wanted equal rights, absolutely. They wanted equal rights, equal treatment for African Americans. But W.E.B. Du Bois said, we want it now. Let's work on the talented 10th. Let's say, you know, they get into the best universities, and let's get our rights now. And Booker T. Washington was more of the camp, let's earn it over time, because he was worried that such a rapid change would have more backlash. So two different strategies with the same end goal. Okay, American imperialism. I guess we have a little bit more time. Questions about the Gilded Age that I can help you with. I think those big ideas are true and kind of cover the big ideas. But any questions, I'll give you a second to chat and text. I'm so sorry this chat thing doesn't work for me, but does work for you. Let me see if I can reset it. Nope, I just have myself. So if you have any questions, type those in. I'm going to see if I can pull up something else. If I can do this real fast. Turn editing on. Let's see if I can, I don't know if Moodle even has a chat, but let's see if it has a chat, and then that will be good. Ah, chat. What do you know? Let's add a chat. We'll do this next time, but at least I'll know for the next time that we can do that, since unfortunately everything else seems to work on the YouTube except the chat feature. Okay, so it's obviously setting it for today, but I can edit it for the next session on Thursday. But that's where it will be. We'll have an AP review chat. Click here to enter the chat. Okay, so that will be much better down the road. Okay. Look at the the comments. Did somebody go into the comments? Glorious day. I have discussion. You're assuming I know what the comments are. Okay, yeah, videos. You can see me scrolling through this like an idiot. Sorry, everyone. Discussion. Ah, hey! I'm in the comments. Okay, so I'm here in the comments too. So any questions, Gilded Age, I'm going to give you a few minutes. We have 10 minutes left. So if you have specific questions, you're not sure of an ID, either colonial, we'll say colonial or gilded, and the next time we'll do antebellum and progressive. If you have any questions, things you don't know, things you want me to review. And then next time we'll have the chat on the Moodle. We'll just have too many windows open, it'll make your head explode. Okay, let me go back over here. All right. Not seeing any questions. Oops. I'll go back to the comments. No more comments. And if you guys would do me a favor, now that we're waiting for some questions, if you kind of see where to go to the comments now that I've found where comments are, there's a discussion tab on the screen. If you will, what do I want you to write? If you will write your name, and if you are in a group of people, the names of the group of people that you are here listening with, if you will do all of that, just write your names. I think that's easy. I was going to write some like rude phrase like, hey, hook 'em, but I don't think that's necessary. So if you'll just write your name in the comments while I'm waiting for any questions, that would be great. And that way I will know. So it's under discussion that you were here, and then next time we'll have the chat on the Moodle, like I said. Okay, while everyone is doing that, everybody feel comfortable with imperialism? Oh, I need to refresh. Oh, the internet. Oh my goodness gracious. Hey everybody. Okay, antebellum, definitely. Can people do Thursday? I'm asking a question that everybody would probably have to respond to very quickly. My plan would be to do Thursday, unless, well, I haven't eaten dinner, but we could continue for another 30 minutes and not do Thursday. Did we go over Gilded? Yes, we did. Hey, everybody. Star Test. Good question. Star Test is 1877 to Oprah. 1877 to Oprah. So it should cover Gilded Age, Progressive, Imperialism, World War I, 1920s, World War II, Cold War, Civil Rights, 70s, obviously the 80s you just covered, 90s, and then 2000. Okay, let's see what else we got. Got people signing in with their name. Awesome. I'm glad this kind of worked. It wasn't quite as well as I would have loved to have happened, but, you know, we're learning. It's a stiff learning curve. All right, more people signing in. Cool, people getting together. Sweet. Any other thoughts? I guess my tentative plan is to say antebellum, progressive next time. Do we need a review on imperialism? Oops, I'm all over the place. Okay, more people signing in. let me see if there's anything else I would want to cover with Gilded Age. Thinking. I'm sure there's something obvious that I'm missing. Oh, the other thing I was going to share with you guys, if you're still here, which is wonderful as you're signing in, there's a neat place, and hopefully I'm not going too fast, and I have this file and I can put it on the Moodle, but if you're with me, historyteacher.net, and you click on American History AP on the site, final review, there's a giant review packet. So if you are just looking for more and more resources that you just have to have, there are sources galore. So themes, people, and let me see if I even put it on the Moodle. I can't remember. But of course you have to go through every slide. Let's see if I link to it. Here we go. I will make this live because apparently I have trouble making things live. This is another review. So you have all of these pages from the Frisco lady, and then I'm making the review games and quizzes available. There's some Jeopardy games somebody made, crash course videos we talked about in a couple classes. Those are there. Flashcards, the review packet, which I just pulled up, part 1 and part 2, just to kind of refresh your memory. Granted, you won't know every single thing on every single page. Don't let that frighten you. Don't be panicked. You should probably know, I would say 70 to 80% of it, and at the end of the day, that is awesome. Because 70 or 80% on the AP test is going to get you a 5. So that's good. Let's see. Next time, can you go over the 20s to the end of Cold War, where I left off? So basically everything I covered before or while I was gone. Imperialism would be nice. Okay, can we hang out for 10 minutes and I'll do like a quick imperialism because it won't take more than 10 minutes. And since you can't respond fast enough, I'm going to say yes. So if you can sit for 10 more minutes, I'm going to finish up imperialism because it's almost my favorite next to the Cold War. And if you took national security, you would be awesome with imperialism. Which obviously isn't helpful to anyone now, sorry. Let's go back to the PowerPoint we were in. Okay, this only covers part of it. Okay, American imperialism is based on the idea, sorry, as I come back. All right, American imperialism in 10 minutes or less. American imperialism is based on the idea that America had the right and moral obligation to go out into the world to make sure people were doing things in the right way. And we didn't really feel like we had come into our own as a world power until the Spanish-American War, where we intervened in intervened in Cuba against Spain for several reasons. One was the Spanish treatment of the Cubans, almost on concentration camp scale, very poorly treated prisoners of war, very emaciated, skinny, looks like, you know, Holocaust pictures if you saw them from Cuba during that time period. It took a while for the United States to intervene. They were asked before to help, and they don't, you know, want to step in. But under McKinley, McKinley is called weak, like a chocolate eclair, if you will. So if you have the spine of a chocolate eclair, which is a donut, you are not very strong, and so he was offended that he was called that. The Delome letter with that, yellow journalism, essentially, you send me the pictures, I'll get you your war. That was the message of the yellow journalists. Their whole purpose in life is to sell papers. They are the tabloids of the day. If you watch Downton Abbey, which I finally saw for the first time while I was having a baby, there's a guy in there that was a yellow journalist who was going to marry one of the girls. Anyway, if that means something to you, great. But basically selling papers at any cost with any stories. So we start a little bit prior to William McKinley with Hawaii. We want Hawaii. It's a fueling station. When I say we, many people wanted Hawaii because we wanted access to China and Asia. And the United States overthrows the Queen. There was obviously a government set up in Hawaii. It was its own country. And the plantation owners, lots of pineapple, Dole pineapple, those sort of things, they organize a revolt, take over Hawaii, say, hey, annex Hawaii, annex Hawaii. It wasn't until the Spanish-American War under William McKinley that we will annex Hawaii. As a result of the Spanish-American War, and this is the last Treaty of Paris, by the way. So we have Treaty of Paris, 1763, and the French-American War, or French-Indian War. 1783, which is the end of the American Revolution, and then Treaty of Paris, 1898, because Spanish-American War is so short. We get Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam. We now become essentially an imperial power. We have absolute control over other countries, over other places, and kind of whatever we want to do with them. Open door policy, John Hay was Secretary of State. He writes this letter. It says, hey, why don't we share China? Because at this point, if you remember in world history, there were things like the Opium Wars, where Britain was coming in and selling opium in China and trying to take advantage. And China was always very much an isolated country. And China said that they didn't want Britain involved, and other countries are trying to get into China. Anyway, the United States says, hey, let's divide it up and have a sphere of influence. And this was mostly because the United States was the last person at the party, and if they didn't suggest this, they would probably be left out of trade with China entirely. So this was, hey, let's all have our little area where we're trade. Picture it maybe like like Canton, where everybody has like a little tent, and you kind of have your area where you sell stuff. That's open door policy, where every nation that wants to can go sell in China, but you have your own spot where you do that. And the Boxer Rebellion was against that. That was in China. They thought they had invisible cloaks, but that's neither here nor there for today. And it was a small group within China that were revolting against outside forces being there, even for economic purposes. So anyway, America gets its first taste of imperialism during William McKinley's time as president through the Spanish-American War. And after that, of course, McKinley's assassinated. Theodore Roosevelt comes into power, and you start to see things like the Platt Amendment in Cuba, where essentially it said, unless you do these things, we will stay in your country. That's how we get Guantanamo Bay. So we start writing their constitution. We also get ourselves involved in organizing the customs or tax collection in a lot of Latin American countries. And essentially it says, if you're not doing something for yourself, I'm sorry, when I say it, Roosevelt Corollary, which is Teddy Roosevelt's addendum, if you will, addition to the Monroe Doctrine. Monroe Doctrine said, okay, anybody who is an independent nation, and remember Monroe is 1823, Monroe Doctrine, any independent countries, which were essentially 90% of Latin America, any independent countries need to remain independent, and the United States will fight to defend their independence. If it's still a colony, it can still be a colony, but we want to protect our neighbors. Okay, so then Roosevelt says, okay, we want to protect our neighbors, but we also want to protect them from themselves, is one way to look at it. So we feel like, as Americans, we are awesome because we have no debt, right? So we can help other people control their money. Anyway, so he says that we can go in and start collecting taxes in these places to make sure the money is handled well. But also in the Roosevelt Corollary it says, but we don't want to go in all the time. We can't be taking care of everybody because we have our own problems, which you're absolutely right, because think about Teddy Roosevelt. Not only do you see him as the speak softly and carry a big stick imperialist guy, he's also a progressive president. So he is well aware that there are problems in the United States, that we can't be in all these other countries all the time. But he tries. Okay. Okay. What else do I want to say about American imperialism? While we think we are kind of ruling the roost on the Western Hemisphere, if you will, we are not seen as equals to those like Germany, Britain. When they are starting to make their alliances for World War I, we are not included, which is A-okay with us. But if you remember, we're not even at the discussion table. We're not even consulted until things get really bad in World War I. And then, of course, Germany tries to get Mexico to fight us through the Zimmermann telegram. And Germany resumes use of U-boats and just shooting down anything they can find in the water. So while we think we are becoming this imperial power, which we are, we have control over other countries and other territories. We're not just the United States. We aren't necessarily equivalent to those, old powers of Europe. So that's an interesting distinction. And even after World War I would say we're still not quite there yet because we retreat inward. Remember, the return to normalcy 1920s, we kind of isolate ourselves into our own culture, leaving other people alone. And then probably after World War II is where we take that leadership, because we wanted to be in the League of Nations right after World War I. No, we suggest it. We don't want to be a part of it. So we don't even take a global leadership point until after World War II when we join the UN. So imperialism exists under William McKinley, primarily Teddy Roosevelt, dollar diplomacy under Taft, and then more of a moral approach under Wilson, trying to do things for the right reasons, especially with regard to the Mexican Revolution. And then, of course, dollar diplomacy is making it safe for American businesses in other countries. So making sure that, for example, in Cuba, when we were writing their constitution, we wanted to make sure that they were clean and didn't have diseases, because we had such a stake in their sugar crop. We had American businesses there growing sugar. And so we wanted to make sure their country was stable and clean so that we could protect American business. So dollar diplomacy is protecting American investments. We had a lot of investment in fruit, both in Latin America and, of course, in Hawaii. So that was dollar diplomacy, protecting American business. And then Roosevelt was big stick diplomacy, of course. Speak softly and then carry the big stick. So we seem all nice and everything, but if you don't do something right, we'll come in and clean house. Okay, I think that is a super short version of imperialism, but the good news is that we started about 7:07. It is now 8:07. So I think that we are good. But before I do that, are there any questions? You want to type any questions in the comment section related to, what did we cover today? Super fast of everything, of course. Colonial, Gilded Age, or imperialism. I'm going to give you like 2 minutes to come up with any questions, and then I'm going to go eat dinner. We're almost done. Last 2 minutes. Okay. Not seeing questions, but I will refresh because apparently I'm bad at refreshing. Let's try it out. Oh. Discussion. Oh, hi, handsome. Okay. Oh, goodness. So we'll have distractions. Oh, man, you look so pasty with the lights on, and so do I, for that matter. Woo. It's like I didn't pay my lecture bill. Oh, don't be sad. These kids are going to be really good on their test. Oh, you look so pasty. Oh. Oh, goodness. Oh, there we go. He looks more normal. Oh, he just woke up. He's not sure what's going on. Oh. All right, any questions? Question. Okay, Declaratory Act. Basically, it was, oh, hey, it's okay. Declaratory Act was England trying to, I mean, I hate to define it as the word it is, but it's England declaring that they have control over the colonies. Oh, I'm sorry. You just woke up, and now I'm putting it in front of the children. So Declaratory Act was just England's way of trying to assert control over the colonies, and there wasn't a lot of back to it, a lot of support. It was just like, yeah, we're in control, rah, we declare, because they just conceded. Okay, I'm crash coursing myself here. They just conceded on the Stamp Act, right? We had the Stamp Act Congress, and they said, no, we don't want to pay the stamp, and they're like, fine, you don't have to pay it, but we're still in charge. And so that was the Declaratory Act. What topics are the multiple choice questions most commonly about? Very good question. If you go to, oh, sorry. Okay, we'll turn him to face you. Okay, I'm going to go quickly over here. Oh, dear goodness. We're going to have to put you somewhere else, huh? I thought you would like hanging out with the children's. Oh, it's not as cool in here as we thought. Oh, no. Okay, all right. Thanks, guys. I'll be smiling another day. Okay, we'll pass you off. No? Oh, you're good now? You just want to stand up? Yeah, he's sporting his Texas pride today. State of Texas, I guess. Okay, this has the stats on it to answer Chana's question. If it will load, which hopefully it will. Okay, babes, you good? Oh, nuts. Okay. Okay, here you go, breakdown by era. Oh, goodness. Most of the questions are going to come from George Washington to World War I. That's where most of the questions will come from. Okay, we'll send you back. You're very sweet, though. Okay, baby pass off successful. Let me screen share with you really fast to answer this question, and if we have any other questions, I will answer those. If the screen share wants to come back. Hello? Did I miss the pop-up? Oh, hello, I so did. Okay, screen share. Here we go. Multiple choice. All right. So again, Washington to World War I are the most. Then 1915 to the present is the next biggest chunk. So even though we, just covered it and probably more rushed than others, it's still a big chunk of the test. And then colonial time is about 20% of the questions. So there's that. And then if you want by topic, the biggest chunk is going to be social. Social, cultural, so education, art, music, social reform, so your whole houses, your asylum changes, inventions, all that good stuff, economics, I'm sorry, so social, then political, of course, so laws, elections, importance of elections, so election of 1960, very important, 1912 election, very important, 1860, important, 1877, 1824, 1800, the smooth transition of Adams to Jefferson will be important. So if any of those elections seem surprising to you, make sure you check those out, because those are important changes or important landmarks in history of some sort. Public policy would be all of the laws that are made. Diplomacy and international relations, those are treaties, wars, other agreements, like the Naval Powers Agreement, which I think you talked about in the 20s, where there was a magic ratio of acceptable ships that navies could have. Anyway, so there's that. If you need more information on that, this is in the first PowerPoint we did way back in January, and I would not even begin to expect you to remember all that stuff. But that's there. They think about if you get 48 correct, you'll have about a 60%, and that would be a 3. But make sure you answer them all. I'm trying to think if there's anything else score related. Not particularly on the multiple choice. If there's an exception, it's not usually on the test. That's really important. So when we talk about protective tariffs, if 95% of the tariffs were protective in the history of the United States, they're not going to be like, okay, do you remember the one that wasn't? If there's a turning point, then that's important. But if it's an exception to, all of these things that seem pretty continuous, meh. It's not trivial stuff that's on there. It's kind of how did this affect. Remember generalities like Cleveland and Harris, economic policy. This is Gilded Age policy, economics. So of course it's going to be that French word, right? Laissez-faire. So if you can place Cleveland and Harrison, okay, no, that's Gilded Age, economic policy. Oh, so my answer should be something like helped big businesses, or made laws to help trusts, something like that. Use your dates, all that good stuff. Let me go back, sorry, real quick to questions. Something about a baby. Oh, but that might be my baby. But I think you said baby somewhere. So maybe so. More comments. I'm refreshing to see if I have any other questions, which I guess you can see that's kind of redundant. Sorry. Okay, so I got chance question, multiple choice. Oh, can you see the baby? Hey, I brought the baby out too. Oh, baby, I get it now. Yeah, I totally gotcha. I'm a little slow sometimes. Lots and lots and lots of people. Good. Any other questions? I'm refreshing one more time because it's 8:17 and I'm getting hungry. And of course, that's a very important reason to stop, right? Okay. I see no more questions, so I will hop back over here. I think this worked okay. I don't know what you thought. I guess I could probably pay my electric bill and put more lights on in my house. So yes, make sure you have commented that you were here. And if I really want to test you, I'll ask you what the baby was wearing. No, but you're fine. As long as you've signed in for today on the discussion, you will be fine. Let's say we'll do the same thing next time on Thursday. And per your text request, or you can tell me in the next 2 days, let me review. Antebellum Society we will cover. So Market Revolution, I'll even throw that in because you'll probably want to have that included. Antebellum Society, so we'll talk Market Revolution, Jacksonian Democracy, and Cultural Reform. And then we'll talk the Progressive Arab, which is also reform. I feel like I talked really quickly. Everybody good? It worked out okay? All right, well then I'm going to sign off here. Thank you. Go to sleep. Have a good breakfast. Knock out the STAR test tomorrow.